Gabriel's Gospel Grace, changing lives and kingdom building one stone at a time.
Hello and good morning to you, and welcome to Motivational Monday. Now, this is the first of a two-parter, and we're going to be looking at the subject of rejection. More importantly, how do we cope with rejection? So let's break down what is rejection. So rejection, when you think about it, is often perceived as a negative. And that's the first thing we have to identify, is that rejection is seen as a negative. And I want to change that perspective, because rejection isn't always negative. In fact, it's a positive in many situations. It's just a scenario that we're looking at rejection through. I think the other problem with rejection is that the emphasis in the world today is acceptance. In fact, if you look at the whole of how modern society is now being driven, it's driven by acceptance. Acceptance of change, acceptance of political opinions and views which are kind of imposed, because it's all about acceptability. So if anything, the weighting towards acceptance and acceptability has been increased to the point that rejection is seen as a negative. So let me give you an example of that. Imagine if you went into a butcher's shop or a baker's shop and you asked for a piece of meat or a particular cake. If they simply reached in and pulled out what looked like a little bit of a green coloured tingy piece of meat, or a cake where half the icing's cracked and broken off and, you know, it looks like it's been dropped on the floor, would you simply accept it as it is? Or would you reject it? Now, if you're rejecting it, it's not for personal reasons. It's not because you personally have anything against the item you just rejected. You're rejecting it on the basis of other measures. And those measures are quality, health, sustainability. Is it good for me? Is it of a standard I'd expect? Is it meeting my expectations? So if you look at it intrinsically, it's got nothing to do with the actual item itself. It's more how we perceive the item. So if we already take the position of being the person looking at acceptance or rejection, then as the person doing the rejecting, it's actually for genuine reasons. Reasons of a standard of expectation. And expectation is a good word to consider in this matter of rejection. Now, in the external side of things, there's not a lot we can do about it. We can't control the external factors in our lives. In them matters, that's where we often rely on the power of prayer as Christians, that we pray for change in the external. But what we do have control over, especially as Christians, is the internal. How did it affect us? Has it affected us in a negative or positive way? And that's what today's episode is looking at. It's looking at rejection as a positive position to come from. So let's take an example of, imagine a weight, a barbell on the floor, extremely heavy, and you crouch down in a squat ready to try and lift that weight. You grab hold of it and you pull and you try and you're determined and you see it lifting off the floor in your mind, and you pull and you try and you stretch and you literally drain all the energy out of you, but it doesn't budge. Technically, the weight rejected your attempts to lift it off the ground. Now we know other external forces were playing a part, especially gravity. But it wasn't personal to you, because the majority of people trying to lift that weight wouldn't be able to lift it off the ground. Your attempts were rejected. So what are you going to do about it? Interesting question. You see, from my perspective, that gives us an opportunity now. What we'd have to do is clearly identify our problem. Our actual problem in this circumstance is we are physically not strong enough. So we have to get stronger. We probably have to go away and train, probably eat more, bulk up. We can change our circumstance. We change our mindset to adjust to the situation. And then we can come back and attempt another day with time. Time, of course, is something I bring up often. Don't expect instant results. But at the same time, even if you lifted it off the ground, you might have still strained and actually pulled your back, slipped a disc, put yourself in hospital, and actually then end up in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. So you see, in that case, rejection serves a very good purpose. You're physically not capable and strong enough to even manage that weight on a regular basis. So rejection in that case is an identifying of something we can change within ourselves. But even though physically you could consider to be external, the first thing that changes our mindset, we have to simply see it as an opportunity for growth and move on from there. My next example is, take the example of a whole key ring full of keys and see a front door lock. We have the keys in our hand, we have the lock. We put the key in the door, we turn it, nothing. It won't budge. So we try again, and we try again, and we try again. And there could be 30 keys on there. Now, either we continue till we find the one that actually fits, or we simply quit and walk away. The reality is, though, the lock is not accepting the key. And as such, that door, the door of opportunity, is not going to open. Now, again, no matter what we think about it, we can get upset about it, we can cry about it, we can be triggered, we can hold a protest, we can do all those sort of things that we see in the world today, because basically we feel rejected. But that's a feeling of rejection. The literal rejection is simply something we can't change. We can't wish that door lock to open. We have to find the right key to unlock that door, which for me as a coach, it's always about unlocking your potential, which is finding the key. So most ideas and approaches will probably get rejected. It's exactly the same as the key scenario. So the key scenario lends itself to ideas because one of the biggest problems is that when it comes to an idea, we often get set in our ways. We assume that our idea is always the best, and most likely the first couple of ideas we had are the ones that we think are the best. Now, as an engineer, I promise you, having a great idea is great, but as an engineer, we know that we have to develop those ideas. We have to expand those ideas. We have to look at other areas and bring in other aspects, other parameters that we have to consider in those developments of those ideas. Then we start to move towards a more robust idea, one that's possibly more acceptable. So let's just think about, when it comes to the aspect of ideas, what are the key parameters we need to think about, exactly like the key. So perhaps the first one is, what can I learn from this rejection? What can I learn to improve my idea? In the case of the key, it has to fit the lock. I mean, a good example is simply like a shed key would not even go into a certain kind of lock anyway. We know that. So physically it won't go in. So perhaps it's absolutely the wrong idea. You know, we're going to have a party where it's 100% vegans attending, and someone says, what should we do for food? And someone shouts out hot dogs. Clearly, that's going to be rejected. It doesn't fit. What else, though, can we improve on? That's the key word, isn't it? Improve. So even if we had an idea, can we improve on it? So let's go back to the vegan lunch. Someone says, what about a salad? Well, a salad can be very basic. Is that really going to fill people up? So, okay, it fits the lock now. We can get it in the keyhole. But if we try and tweak it, it's not going to work. It's not going to turn because it's not enough. It's not substantial for a lunch. A snack perhaps, but not a lunch. So we need to improve on that idea. But at least we're on the right track now. Finally, probably one of the key ones in all this, pun intended, communicate. Can we communicate it better? You see, often it's not that the idea is bad. It's not that the concept isn't correct, but it's often how we communicate it. So I suppose the idea now is, imagine that we've put the key in and it is the right key fit, but we're turning it the wrong way. We can't unlock the door because we're going against it. Often, whether it's a job interview, whether it's in a meeting, you're trying to put an idea forward, you might just be communicating it in the wrong way. So therefore, the conclusion is your idea gets rejected. You go for the job interview, you are rejected. It's a conversation among friends. Not you, but your ideas are what are rejected. Now, on the back of the ideas being rejected, and clearly identifying it's not you personally being rejected, we have to identify why. Why were you rejected? Why was your ideas rejected? And often we have to come back to the lock. The lock has all sorts of tumblers and, probably different aspects that has to be met at the right place. I mean, a key has literally little divots and peaks and troughs, and they have to line up perfect to allow the tumbler to turn. But that's exactly the problem, isn't it? That the lock is what we have to try and match to. That means it's not about you implicitly at all. It'll be about the other person's expectation. So the circumstances and expectations of the other person are actually the key things that are causing your potential rejection. Now, a good example I often give to clients is if I were going for a particular part in a film. Now, that part in the film might have this idea of a guy with a full head of hair. He's a 34 waist. He looks smart. He's got this fantastic accent. He pronounces everything perfectly. And then I turn up. Well, it doesn't matter how good or experienced an actor I am. I'm not what they want. Because in their head, they already have a perception of what they're looking for. Now, I could argue with them. Now we come back to communicate. If I communicate effectively and sort of almost persuade them that someone like me would just bring more depth to the character, someone like me is more realistic, the audience can connect better, then my communication may persuade them to change the lock that is rejecting me. But it might not. It's not personal. I simply have to accept I am a key. But as a key, I need to find the lock I do fit. Or I have to modify my ideas from the perspective of being the key. So it's not personal. And many people can't handle rejection because they take it personal. And more importantly, it's often seen as a personal attack. But even if it wasn't a personal attack, people take offence because people don't appreciate their ideas. So I'm going to be honest. Why is your idea special? Why should I care about your idea? What makes your idea better than my idea? You see, that's the problem, isn't it? Because it's pride. Pride is that I have the best idea. My first idea is the better one. I'm the smarter one. I'm the more intellectual one. I'm the one who has more experience. But that doesn't make it an acceptable idea. In fact, it's often a rejected idea. One thing that puzzles me a little bit in the world today, especially when it comes to mainstream media, they bring in people from the past. So a good example is I often see Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of England, where they're asking his opinion on a matter. Well, the truth is, Tony Blair's not the Prime Minister anymore. He was rejected. He wasn't acceptable later down the line in his career. His views and ideas are probably not acceptable today. But mainstream media, understanding these concepts of acceptance and rejection, will go to people who are going to give them their acceptable answer that they want to portray and broadcast to people. Now, as I've already said earlier at the beginning of this episode, people are persuaded to be more accepting of things. What is acceptable? But sometimes, like the food scenario, we have to stand back and look at something we're being offered and decide whether we're going to accept it or reject it. Now, of course, the biggest reason people struggle with rejection is because in this world today, being accepted is more important than truth. Being accepted is more important than saying and doing what's right. And being accepted is a means for generating support and moving forward in life. But is that a good basis for you to live from? Because, of course, the day comes when you're not accepted and you're rejected. And it's emotionally painful for most people, especially if you've already been popular and you've had status, fame and clout. It's always hard to fall from that place of grace, isn't it? When people start to reject you or even mock you or laugh at your ideas. I always talk about in a race, the person with the most to gain is the person at the back, the person who always comes last, because they're comfortable coming last. They're just happy to take part. And they've got everything to gain going forward. But people that are always placing the top 3, they've got everything to lose. And the minute someone falls into 4th place, and then 5th, and then 6th, I've had clients like that. They slip from their primary position, and they see it as personal rejection. And of course, when I break it down and look at how nothing's changed internally for them, but physically, they're not as strong anymore. Their stamina is decreasing. They may have illness. But also from an external perspective, other people are better. Other people are stronger and faster. It's not a personal reflection of who you are. It's external reality. So to conclude this episode, it's recognising that all of this rejection is not always personal. It's simply a case of we just need to pick it apart and understand rejection, and especially from the point of acceptance, because the things we learn to accept in life may not be good for us. The things we reject in life may be good for us. Now, Jesus, the truth, the way, the life, peace, if you think about it, these are all things that are typically rejected. Love, often rejected. Truth, especially rejected. And peace, we see circumstances in the world where if people really wanted peace, they could. But it's rejected. What is accepted, though, is to be accepted. No pun intended. It's much easier to go with the crowd and agree with others and be accepted. Much easier to turn away things that should be rejected and ignore them for the purpose of being accepted. My point is, we are all accepted. We've all been accepted by God through Christ. Now, this is only part 1. Part 2, we're going to pick it apart even more. We're going to look at the details of how we can really get to grips with rejection and what we can do about it. But today, if you are feeling rejected, don't take it personal. I'd suggest you reach out to the Lord. Simply say a simple prayer. Say, Lord, I know you accept me for who I am. Accept me this day. And I accept your love and peace. Look forward to seeing you at part 2. God bless. If you were blessed by this video, why not give it a like? Also subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon to be notified of future videos.